A successful man, marked by a difficult childhood, has an unexpected experience while taking his daughters to a toy store. Upon crossing paths with a sad little boy, he is confronted with a reflection of his own deprived past. This encounter sets in motion a series of events that will transform not only their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this is going to be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Chapter 1. Saturday arrived, bringing with it that typical New York City heat of the early afternoon, when the sun still shines brightly on the asphalt of Fifth Avenue and people walk hurriedly through the mall corridors, seeking refuge in the air conditioning and gleaming storefronts. Robert Miller parked his discreet car, a black sedan that didn't draw attention, in the underground garage of the Galleria. He had always preferred it that way, without ostentation, without fanfare. As he turned off the engine, he heard the crystalline laughter of his daughters in the back seat, a sound that melted away any tension accumulated during the week. Sophia and Isabella, or Bella as everyone called her, were identical 6-year-old twins, with wavy brown hair tied in pigtails and honey-colored eyes that sparkled with enthusiasm. They wore matching floral dresses, a choice they insisted on maintaining, as if it reinforced the unbreakable bond that united them. Robert smiled as he saw the two of them already unbuckling their seatbelts before he could even open the door. "Daddy, Daddy, let's go," Sophia said with that sweet impatience that only children can have without sounding rude. "The toy store is going to close, and I want to see the new dolls they released. And I want to see the stuffed animals," Bella added, jumping out of the car as soon as Robert opened the back door. "They say they have giant teddy bears you can hug while you sleep." Robert held their hands, one on each side, and walked toward the elevator. He felt his heart tighten whenever he did this, whenever he saw his daughters happy with such simple things. He knew the value of it, knew the weight of absence, of impossibility. His childhood had been very different. He had grown up in the South Bronx, one of New York's toughest neighborhoods, where the mall windows were just distant mirages he glimpsed from a crowded bus. He remembered perfectly pressing his face against the foggy glass of public transport, watching families enter places that seemed to belong to another world. His mother worked as a house cleaner, leaving before the sun rose and returning when the moon was already high. He spent hours alone, dreaming of things he could never have. But life had taken turns, and Robert had built an empire in the affordable housing sector. He had designed and erected accessible condominiums for low-income families, offering dignity to thousands of people. The business had prospered beyond his expectations, and today he owned a fortune that not even in his wildest childhood dreams had he imagined possible. However, he remained discreet. He didn't show off. He didn't flaunt it. He preferred the simplicity and the invisibility it brought. Upon reaching the toy store floor, the girls shot ahead, running through the brightly lit aisles filled with colorful shelves that rose to the ceiling. Robert followed a few steps behind, watching with tenderness as they touched everything, pointed at dolls, held stuffed animals against their chests, and tested remote control cars. The store was crowded, as it always was on Saturdays. Parents pushed full shopping carts, children screamed with joy, and salespeople walked by offering help. Sophia stopped in front of a shelf with dolls that looked like fairy tale princesses. Her eyes shone as brightly as the dolls' dresses. "Daddy, look at this one," she whispered with reverence, holding a blonde doll in a sparkling blue dress. "She's beautiful." Bella, meanwhile, had found a golden stuffed puppy with button eyes and floppy ears. She clutched the toy to her chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Can I get him, Daddy?" she asked with that soft voice that melted any resistance. Robert smiled and nodded. "Of course you can, my loves. Let's go to the checkout." He took the toys from their hands and walked toward the lines forming near the store's exit. Sophia and Bella followed him, chattering excitedly about the names they would give their new toys. Their happiness was palpable, so genuine that Robert felt a wave of gratitude wash over his chest. He could give them this, he could provide them with limitless joy without worries. But it was then, as he was almost at the checkout, that something made him stop. Outside the store, beyond the transparent glass doors that separated the illuminated interior from the mall corridor, there was a boy. He must have been about 5 or 6 years old, wearing a faded t-shirt and simple shorts, and his face was completely pressed against the display window. His brown eyes were fixed on something specific, and Robert followed the boy's gaze until he identified the object of desire. It was a red fire truck, with lights that flashed and an extendable ladder that went up and down. The toy was strategically positioned in the window, catching the eye of anyone passing by. The boy didn't move. He was completely mesmerized, his hands flat against the glass, his fingers leaving small marks on the cool surface. Beside him, a young woman who must have been his mother held his free hand while looking at her son with an expression that Robert recognized instantly. It was the same expression his mother had when he asked for something she couldn't buy. Sadness mixed with helplessness, love mixed with pain. The woman knelt to the boy's level and said something in his ear, probably trying to convince him to leave, to forget the truck, to accept that this desire would have to wait. But the boy shook his head, still without taking his eyes off the toy. He wasn't crying, not making a scene. He just looked with that silent intensity of someone who knows they are facing something unattainable. Robert felt his chest tighten. His hands began to tremble slightly as he held his daughter's toys. It was as if time had turned back, as if he himself were once again on the outside of that window, on the outside of all the places where dreams were sold at prices his family could never afford. He remembered a store on Canal Street where he had once passed with his mother. There was a blue robot in the window that transformed into a car. Robert had been paralyzed before that technological marvel, that piece of plastic and metal that represented everything he didn't have. His mother had said, her voice choked, that one day he would have a toy like that. But that day never came. Sophia tugged on her father's shirt sleeve. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked, tilting her head with concern. Robert blinked, returning to the present. He looked at his daughters and then again at the boy outside. The woman was now gently pulling him by the arm, trying to get him to walk. But the boy resisted, reluctant to leave the fire truck behind. Robert saw when he finally gave in, lowering his head and letting his mother lead him away from the window. The defeat in that small gesture was like a knife in Robert's heart. Bella had seen it too. She and Sophia exchanged glances, that silent communication only twins have. And then Sophia touched her father's arm again. "Daddy, that boy wanted a toy," she said, pointing discreetly to the silhouette that was already moving away down the mall corridor. "He looked sad," Bella added, biting her lower lip. Robert swallowed hard. His daughters were young, but they already understood much more than he imagined. They were sensitive, observant, able to see beyond their own needs. It was something he and his ex-wife had always tried to teach: empathy, compassion, gratitude. Sophia looked at the doll her father was holding, then at Bella, and then back at Robert. "Daddy, we could give our toys to him," she suggested in a soft, almost shy voice, as if she wasn't sure if such an offer was allowed. Robert felt a lump in his throat. He looked at his daughter, then at Bella, who was nodding vigorously. "Yes, Daddy, we can buy them another day. He needs them more than we do." That moment was transformative. Robert felt his eyes burn, tears threatening to escape. His daughters, raised in abundance, never having known deprivation, were willing to give up their joy to bring happiness to a stranger. It was the most beautiful lesson he could ever receive. He knelt to their level, gently holding their shoulders. "Are you sure, girls?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I can buy everything again. You don't have to give them up." But Sophia shook her head. "We have a lot of things at home, Daddy. He has nothing." "And maybe he's never had a new toy," Bella added with the innocent wisdom of a child. "We can make him happy." Robert hugged them both tightly, feeling love overflow from his chest. "All right then, let's do it. Let's buy the truck he wanted." He stood up quickly and walked to the window, asking a salesperson to bring the red fire truck. While he waited, he looked through the glass in the direction the woman and the boy had gone. They were still in sight, walking slowly down the corridor, the woman saying something as she stroked her son's head. Robert paid quickly, took the bag with the truck, and held his daughter's hands. Come on, quick, before they leave the mall. The three of them ran out of the store, crossing the corridor with hurried steps. Sophia and Bella were laughing as if this were an exciting adventure. Robert felt his heart pound, a mixture of urgency and expectation. He had to catch them. He had to do this. Finally, they spotted them near the escalator, about to go down to the lower floor. Robert quickened his pace. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice louder than he intended. The woman turned, surprised. She must have been about 30, with dark hair tied in a simple ponytail, a pretty face, but marked by a deep weariness that had settled into every line of expression. She wore a beige diner uniform, the kind Robert recognized from various establishments. Her hands were red, calloused from hard work. The boy beside her looked at Robert and the twins with curiosity mixed with shyness. "Hi, sorry to bother you," Robert began, trying to find the right words. "But my daughters saw your son looking at a toy in the window and, well, they'd like to give him something." The woman frowned, confused. "What?" she asked, her voice low and suspicious. Sophia stepped forward, holding the bag. "We bought the fire truck for him," she said with a shy smile, "the one he was looking at." The woman's eyes widened. No, she shook her head quickly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Thank you so much, but we can't accept. That's too kind." Robert saw the boy looking at the bag with the same intensity he had when he was in front of the window. His little eyes shone, full of restrained hope. "Please," Robert insisted, his voice gentle. "It would be an honor for us. My daughters insisted. They wanted your son to have this gift." The woman looked at her son, then at Robert, then at the twins who were smiling sweetly. Her eyes began to well up. She tried to speak, but her voice failed her. Gratitude, shame, emotion, it all mixed into an expression that nearly broke Robert's heart. Bella held out the bag to the boy. "It's yours," she said simply, "so you can play a lot." The boy looked at his mother, silently asking for permission. The woman finally nodded, unable to speak. The boy took the bag with both hands, opened it slowly, and saw the red truck shining inside the packaging. His eyes filled with tears instantly. He clutched the bag to his chest and began to cry silent sobs that shook his small shoulders. The mother knelt beside him, pulling him into a tight hug while she also cried. "Thank you so much," she managed to say between tears, looking at Robert. "Thank you so much." Sophia and Bella came closer and hugged the boy along with his mother, creating a small circle of emotion there in the middle of the mall corridor. People passed by, some stopped to watch, but no one interrupted. It was a sacred moment, one of those that don't need words. Robert stood watching the scene with a swollen heart. He saw in the boy a reflection of himself, saw in the mother a reflection of his own mother, and he saw in his daughters the possibility of a better world, where empathy still existed, where kindness was still possible. When they finally separated, the woman wiped the tears from her face with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to compose herself. I'm not one to cry like this, it's just that—" She hesitated, her voice failing again. "It's just that it's been hard. And She looked at her son, who was holding the truck as if it were a treasure. "He's never had a new toy. I've always picked up used ones when I could. This is—" She shook her head, speechless. "You don't have to explain," Robert said gently. "I understand. More than you can imagine." She looked at him intensely, as if trying to read something in his face. For a moment, Robert felt that she saw beyond the simple clothes he wore, beyond the common appearance he cultivated. It was as if she recognized something familiar in him, a shared pain, a similar story. The boy finally found his voice. "Thank you," he said quietly, looking at Sophia and Bella. "Thank you very much." "You're welcome," Sophia replied with a wide smile. "What's your name?" "Lucas," he said, still clutching the truck to his chest. "I'm Sophia, and this is my sister, Bella. We're twins." Lucas smiled for the first time, a small but genuine smile. "You look the same." "Yeah," Bella laughed. "Everyone says that." Lucas's mother placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "We have to go, honey. I need to get back to work soon. She looked at Robert again. Seriously, thank you so much. You don't know how much this means. It was a pleasure, Robert said. Take care. They said goodbye with waves, and the woman headed with Lucas to the escalator. Robert saw the boy look back one last time, still holding the truck as if he were afraid someone would take it from his hands. Then they went down and disappeared from view. Sophia and Bella stood beside their father, watching until they could no longer see them. "That was nice, Daddy," Sophia said, holding his hand. "I feel good inside." "Me too," Bella agreed. "Can we do this again someday?" Robert smiled, squeezing their hands. "Whenever you want, my girls. Always." They went back to the toy store and Robert bought the doll and the stuffed puppy again. The girls were happy, but there was something different now, a greater understanding of the value of things, of the luck they had, of the responsibility that came with abundance. Robert noticed it in their eyes, in the way they thanked him with more intensity, how they held the toys with more care. On the way back home, as he drove through the bustling streets of New York, Robert couldn't get the image of the mother and son out of his head. The sadness in her eyes, the gratitude mixed with shame, the hardship of life marked in every gesture. He knew exactly what it was like. He knew the weight of not being able to give your child what all the other children seemed to have. He knew the pain of saying no when all you wanted to do was say yes. "Daddy, are you okay?" Bella asked from the back seat, noticing his silence. "I am, my love. Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" "About how strange life is," he replied, looking in the rear view, in the mirror at the two of them. "How sometimes we meet people who need us and we need them too, even without knowing it." Sophia tilted her head. "Are we going to see Lucas again?" Robert smiled. "I don't know, honey, but I hope so." And he didn't know yet, at that moment, as he drove back to the spacious apartment on the Upper East Side, that this casual encounter at the mall had not been just an isolated act of kindness. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would change all their lives in ways he could never have imagined. It was the first chapter of a story that was just beginning to unfold, a story of love, pain, overcoming, and family. That night, after putting his daughters to sleep, Robert stood on the apartment balcony looking at the city lights. New York twinkled endlessly under the dark sky, millions of lives happening simultaneously, each with its joys and sorrows, its victories and defeats. Somewhere in that urban immensity, he knew, were the woman and the boy, probably in a small and simple place, but today with a little more joy than they had before. Lucas must be sleeping, hugging the fire truck, dreaming of sirens and heroic rescues, and his mother must be lying down, thinking about how life sometimes surprises you, how kindness still exists, how a simple gesture can mean the whole world to someone who has nothing. Robert took a deep breath, feeling the night breeze touch his face. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where they lived. He didn't know if he would see them again. But he knew with absolute certainty that this encounter had changed something inside him. It had rekindled something he thought he had lost, in the years of hard work, in the years of empire building, in the years of financial success. It had rekindled the memory of who he was, where he came from, of the reason he did what he did. And as the city continued to pulse under the night, Robert made a silent promise to himself. If he ever met that woman and that boy again, he would do more than just give a toy. He would make a real difference. Because he knew, better than anyone, that a life can be transformed when someone extends a hand and says, with sincerity, "I've been there too, and you are not alone." Chapter 2. Marina Shaw woke up at 5 in the morning to the jarring sound of the cheap alarm clock she had bought at a dollar store. The apartment was plunged into the typical darkness of a New York dawn, that heavy silence that precedes the city's chaos. She quickly turned off the alarm, afraid of waking Lucas, and lay there for a few seconds, gathering strength to face another day. Her body ached. Her back was tense from so many hours on her feet. Her feet were swollen, her hands red and rough from constant contact with hot water and cleaning products. But there was no time for laments. The rent was late, the electricity bill was 3 days overdue, and the money from her last paycheck had practically evaporated between food, transportation, and medicine. She got up slowly, stepping onto the cold floor of the small one-bedroom apartment she shared with her son. The space was tiny, located in an old building in Queens, in the neighborhood of Jamaica. 250 square feet that housed a room that served as both a living room and bedroom, a minuscule bathroom and a kitchen where two people could barely fit. The walls had mold in the corners, the paint was peeling in some spots, and the smell of dampness was constant, but it was what Marina could afford. It was her refuge, her home, the only place in the world she could call her own. She went into the bathroom and washed her face with cold water, observing her reflection in the stained mirror. 32 years old, but she looked 40. The exhaustion was etched into every feature, in the dark circles under her eyes, in the lines, around her mouth, in the hair that was beginning to show a few premature white strands. When had she become like this, she wondered? When had life become this daily battle for survival, where every dollar was counted, every meal planned, every desire indefinitely postponed? She put on the beige uniform of the diner where she worked, a place called the Home Plate Diner, located in downtown Manhattan. The shirt was loose and shapeless. The pants had a small tear at the hem that she had mended with thread, and the apron was stained with grease that wouldn't come out, even with the strongest detergents. She tied her hair into a tight ponytail, put on her worn-out sneakers, and grabbed the old bag she carried every day. Before leaving, she went into the room where Lucas was sleeping soundly, hugging the red fire truck he had received at the mall 3 days ago. Marina stood at the door, watching her son in the faint light coming from the window. He was sleeping with a smile on his lips, the truck carefully positioned next to his pillow. Since getting the toy, Lucas hadn't let it go for a second. He took it everywhere, showed it to the neighbors, played alone, creating elaborate stories of rescues and heroism. It was the first time Marina had seen him so happy, so complete, and that broke her heart while also warming it. It broke because she knew she couldn't have given it to him, that she had depended on the kindness of strangers to see her son smile like that. And it warmed because, in the end, Lucas was happy, and that was all that mattered. She approached, gave him a gentle kiss on the forehead and whispered, "I love you, my love." Her neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, a retired lady who lived in the apartment next door, was already up and would look after Lucas until it was time to take him to the local public school. Marina paid her what she could, usually in food or small favors, since money was always short. Mrs. Peterson had a good heart and treated Lucas as if he were her own grandson. It was a blessing to have someone like that nearby. Marina left the apartment at 5:30, walked down the 4 flights of stairs of the building without an elevator, and walked to the bus stop on the main avenue. The city was still waking up, but there was already movement. Workers like her, who had to cross all of New York to get to their low-paying jobs, already occupied the bus stops, the subway stations, the sidewalks. Marina knew many of them by sight, sharing with them the same tired look, the same silent resignation of those who know life is hard, but have no choice but to face it every day. The journey downtown took almost 2 hours. She took a crowded bus to the Jamaica Center subway station, then faced 3 transfers, and another 15-minute walk to the diner. She arrived at 7:15, 15 minutes before her start time, because her boss, Mr. Douglas, had a habit of docking the pay of anyone who was late, even by a minute. The Home Plate Diner was on a busy street near Union Square, a place that was always full during lunchtime. It was a simple establishment, with a glass counter displaying fried snacks, red formica tables, and plastic chairs. It served cheap meals to local workers, students, and homeless people who scrounged up coins to buy a plate of food. Marina worked in the kitchen, washing dishes, chopping vegetables, frying snacks, cleaning accumulated grease from the tiles and the floor. It was heavy, hot, exhausting work. The steam from the pots made her face red. The oil splattered and burned her arms. The bleach irritated her hands. And Mr. Douglas, the owner of the diner, was a difficult man. Fat, sweaty, always in a bad mood, he ran the place with shouts and threats. He humiliated employees in front of customers, deducted any mistake from their pay, and never gave a day off even when someone was sick. Marina had lost count of how many times he had called her incompetent, slow, stupid. But she endured it. She needed the job. She needed the money. There was no luxury of dignity when hunger knocked at the door. That morning, upon arriving at the diner, Marina greeted her colleagues quickly, put on her apron and started working. The hours passed in a blur of frantic activity, washing dishes, drying, stacking, chopping tomatoes, onions, peppers, frying fritters, turnovers, empanadas, mopping the floor that became slippery with oil, enduring the suffocating heat of the kitchen with no proper ventilation. Her mind went into automatic mode, disconnecting from the present, wandering to distant places. She thought about Lucas, about how fast he was growing, about how he would soon need new clothes she wouldn't know how to buy. She thought about his school, about the lessons she tried to help him with, even though she hadn't studied much herself. She thought about the uncertain future, about how to get out of this situation, about how to give her son a better life. Marina had no family. She had grown up in shelters after her mother abandoned her as a baby. She never knew her father. She had spent her childhood and adolescence being transferred from one home to another, always feeling invisible, always alone. At 18, when she left the last shelter, she tried to build a life for herself. She worked in various places, always in manual labor jobs, always earning little. She met Lucas's father when she was 25. He was handsome, charming, full of promises. He said he loved her, that he would take care of her, that they would build a family together. Marina believed him. She got pregnant. And then, when Lucas was born, the man disappeared, vanished like smoke, leaving only debts and empty excuses. Since then, it was just her and Lucas against the world, and she fought every day to ensure her son wouldn't go through the same hardships she had, that he wouldn't feel abandoned, that he wouldn't grow up without love. Even if it meant working to exhaustion, even if it meant giving up anything for herself, even if it meant living in a tiny apartment and wearing old clothes. Lucas was her reason for being, her purpose, her strength. The day at the diner passed amidst the usual chaos. Mr. Douglas yelled at her twice because the dishes weren't being washed at the speed he wanted. At lunchtime, the kitchen became a hell, with orders piling up, customers complaining, grease splattered everywhere. Marina didn't stop for a minute, working without rest until her legs ached and her hands were red and swollen. At 3 in the afternoon, when she finally got a 15-minute break, she went out the back door of the diner to get some fresh air. She sat on the dirty step of the alley, took off her shoes for a moment and massaged her sore feet. She looked up at the grey New York sky, covered by low clouds and pollution, and sighed deeply. How much longer could she take this, she wondered? How much longer would she have the strength to go on? But then she thought of Lucas, of his smile as he slept hugging the fire truck, and she knew the answer. She would endure it for as long as necessary. There was no other option. 4 days after the encounter at the mall, something unexpected happened. It was a Saturday, and Lucas had come with her to the diner because Mrs. Peterson was visiting her daughter in Yonkers and couldn't watch him. Marina didn't like bringing her son to work, but sometimes there was no choice. He would sit in a corner of the diner, drawing on sheets of paper she took from an old notebook she had bought at the stationery store, always quiet, always well-behaved. He brought his fire truck and played softly, creating his stories without bothering anyone. Marina was in the kitchen, as always, immersed in her work, when she heard a familiar shout from the dining area. It was Lucas. She dropped everything immediately and ran to see what had happened, her heart pounding with panic. But when she reached the dining area, she found no emergency. On the contrary, Lucas was standing, smiling from ear to ear, pointing to a table near the window. "Mommy, Mommy, look who's here!" he shouted, jumping with excitement. "It's the girls from the mall, the ones who gave me the truck." Marina turned her head in the direction Lucas was pointing and felt the world stop. There they were, the twins in matching dresses, sitting at the table with a man. The same man who had given the truck to Lucas, the man she hadn't been able to completely get out of her head for the past few days. Robert saw them at the same instant. His eyes widened in surprise, and then a broad smile lit up his face. "What an incredible coincidence," he said, getting up from his chair. Sophia and Bella recognized Lucas immediately and darted toward him, hugging him with the genuine joy of children finding a friend. "Lucas! Lucas!" Bella shouted. You're here!" Marina stood frozen, not knowing how to react. She felt her cheeks burn with shame. Here she was in her grease-stained uniform, her disheveled hair, her red and swollen hands. And there he was, the man who had been too kind, who had given an expensive gift without asking for anything in return. The difference between their worlds had never seemed so stark. "Hi," Robert said, approaching cautiously, as if sensing her discomfort. "What a coincidence to find you here. We decided to come have lunch in this neighborhood today and, well, we ended up choosing this place." "That's nice," Marina managed to say, her voice trembling. "Welcome." The children were already chatting excitedly, showing each other things. Lucas proudly displayed the truck he had brought with him, and the girls told him about the doll and the puppy their father had bought. Their joy was contagious, genuine, pure. Robert looked at Marina attentively. "You work here?" he asked gently. "Yes," Marina replied, looking down. "In the kitchen." "That must be hard work." "It is," she admitted. "But it's what I have." There was a brief silence, not awkward, but filled with mutual understanding. Robert seemed to understand things she hadn't said, seemed to see beyond appearances. The children continued to talk, and Lucas pulled Sophia and Bella by the hand, leading them to the corner where he had been drawing. "Look what I made," he said, showing them the drawings of fire trucks he had scribbled. Robert looked at Marina again. "Can I ask you something?" he said with a gentle smile. "Can we invite Lucas to have lunch with us? It would make the girls so happy." Marina hesitated. Part of her wanted to accept, but another part felt uncomfortable, as if she were accepting charity again. "I don't know if," she began, but Lucas had already heard. "Can I, Mommy? Can I?" he asked, his eyes shining with expectation. Marina looked at her son, at that, little face full of hope, and couldn't bring herself to say no. "You can," she said quietly, "but behave." "I always behave," Lucas replied with conviction, making Robert laugh. They sat at the table, the three children on one side, Robert on the other. Marina went back to the kitchen, but she couldn't concentrate. Every minute she glanced through the glass that separated the kitchen from the dining area, watching Lucas sitting at the table, chatting animatedly, eating the lunch Robert had ordered. Seeing her son like this, happy and included, stirred something deep inside her. It was gratitude mixed with sadness, relief mixed with fear. Mr. Douglas passed through the kitchen and saw Marina standing there. "What are you doing just looking?" he growled. "There's a pile of dishes to wash." Marina quickly returned to work, but her heart was still at the table with the children. When her break finally came, she left the kitchen and approached the table discreetly. The children were laughing, Lucas was telling a story about school, and the girls were listening intently. Robert noticed Marina and gestured for her to sit down. "I can't," Marina said. "I only have 15 minutes." "Then sit." "For 15 minutes," Robert insisted gently. "The kids are loving the company." Marina gave in and sat on the edge of her chair, still uncomfortable. Robert ordered a juice for her, but Marina refused. "I'm fine, thank you." He didn't insist. Instead, he started a natural conversation, asking about simple things, how her day was, how Lucas was doing in school, if they lived nearby. Marina responded with short sentences, still cautious, still suspicious. Why would a man like him, who clearly had money and possessions, be interested in talking to someone like her? What did he want? Was it pity? Was it charity disguised as kindness? But Robert seemed genuine. He didn't ask invasive questions, didn't show superiority, didn't look at her with disdain. He treated her with respect, as if they were equals. And that confused Marina, because she wasn't used to being treated like that. The 15 minutes passed too quickly. Marina had to go back to work, but she promised Lucas she would come back to get him when her shift ended. He was happy, continued playing with Sophia and Bella, and Robert assured her he would keep an eye on him. The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. Marina worked mechanically, but her thoughts were far away. She thought about the man and his daughters, about the kindness they showed, about the way they treated Lucas as if he were important. No one had ever treated her son like that. No one had ever cared. When her shift finally ended at 7 in the evening, Marina came out of the kitchen exhausted, her body aching, her feet swollen. But there was Lucas, still sitting at the table with the girls, and Robert, laughing at something Sophia had just said. The scene made her pause. They looked like a family. They looked like they belonged together. Robert stood up when he saw her. "The kids didn't want to separate," he said with a smile. "But I think it's time for everyone to go home." Marina agreed. "Let's go, Lucas. We need to catch the bus." "I can give you a ride," Robert offered. "It's late, and public transport must be crowded." Marina shook her head quickly. "You don't have to. We're used to it. But I insist, please." The girls would love to spend more time with Lucas on the way. Marina looked at her son, saw the expectation in his eyes, and once again couldn't bring herself to refuse. "Okay," she relented. "Thank you." Robert's car was simple, a common black sedan, nothing extravagant. This surprised Marina, who had expected something more ostentatious. The children sat in the back seat, chatting animatedly, while Marina sat in the front, stiff and uncomfortable. Robert drove calmly, asking questions about the route. When they arrived at the building where Marina lived, she thanked him quickly and got out of the car with Lucas. But before they could enter the building, Sophia shouted from the window, "Can we come here again, Lucas? Can we be friends?" Lucas looked at his mother with pleading in his eyes. Marina swallowed hard and nodded. "You can," she said, surprising herself. And so began a routine that would change everything. Every Saturday, Robert and the twins would show up at the diner. They would order lunch, spend hours talking with Lucas, include him in games and stories. Marina watched from a distance, still cautious, still building walls around her heart. But slowly those walls began to crack, because Robert wasn't like she had imagined. He didn't judge her. He didn't treat her with pity. He talked to her as if her opinions mattered, as if her story was valid, as if she were more than just a diner worker struggling to survive. And that was new. That was scary. That was dangerous. Because Marina had learned a long time ago not to trust anyone, not to depend on anyone, not to open up to anyone. To trust was to risk being hurt. To depend was to risk being abandoned. To open up was to risk being destroyed. And she had been destroyed too many times to risk it again. Chapter 3. Saturdays became sacred. Every week, punctually at 11 in the morning, Robert would arrive at the home plate diner with Sophia and Bella. The girls already knew the way by heart, running up the 3 steps at the entrance and immediately looking for Lucas, who waited for them anxiously in his usual corner with his drawings and the fire truck he never let go of. The reunion was always the same, full of hugs, laughter, and rushed conversations about everything that had happened during the week. Marina watched this scene repeat itself, Saturday after Saturday, and something inside her began to change. The walls she had built around her heart, brick by brick, over years of disillusionment and abandonment, began to show fissures. They were small cracks at first, almost imperceptible, but they grew with each conversation with Robert, each exchanged glance, each gesture of care he showed not only for Lucas, but for her as well. Robert was different from any man Marina had ever known. He didn't try to impress her with empty promises or pretty words. He didn't look at her with that mixture of desire and disdain she knew so well, the way some men saw women in her situation, as if they were inferior, available, desperate. Robert treated her with genuine respect. He asked about her day, listened to her answers with real attention, and remembered small details she mentioned. When Marina commented that Lucas loved to draw but didn't have proper materials, Robert showed up the following Saturday with a complete set of colored pencils, new notebooks, and felt-tip pens. It wasn't an expensive or extravagant gift, but it was thoughtful, it was considerate, it was exactly what Lucas needed. And the girls were wonderful with her son. They treated him like a brother, included him in all their games, and defended him when other children at the diner made mean comments about his old clothes or his worn-out shoes. Sophia had a protective side and would get angry when someone was unfair to Lucas. Bella was sweeter, always hugging the boy when she noticed he was sad and making up funny stories to make him laugh. The three children created a bond that transcended social differences, that ignored the barriers adults built. To them, they were just friends. They were just children being children. Marina allowed herself, for the first time, in a long time, to feel something other than exhaustion and worry. She began to look forward to Saturdays with a different kind of anxiety, not just because she knew Lucas would be happy, but because she also wanted to see Robert. She wanted to hear his calm voice, his easy laugh, his stories about the girls. During the week, while washing dishes or frying snacks in the suffocating kitchen, she would find herself thinking about him, replaying conversations, imagining what they would say at their next meeting. But whenever these thoughts arose, Marina would forcefully push them away. She couldn't allow herself that. She couldn't delude herself. A man like Robert, even if he didn't flaunt his wealth, clearly had a stable, organized, comfortable life. She was nothing more than a diner worker, a single mother with no family, no future, nothing to offer but problems and complications. Why would he be genuinely interested in her? It was probably just charity disguised as friendship. He probably felt sorry for her, and Marina had been the object of pity long enough to know how much that hurt. So she kept her distance. She talked, but she didn't open up completely. She smiled, but she didn't let her guard down. She accepted the company, but not the kindness, because accepting kindness meant owing something, and Marina didn't want to owe anyone anything. She already owed life too much. On a particularly hot Saturday in November, the diner was packed. The old air conditioner was malfunctioning, leaving the room stuffy and suffocating. Customers were complaining, orders were piling up, and Mr. Douglas was in a terrible mood. Marina rushed between the kitchen and the dining area, carrying plates, collecting dirty dishes, cleaning tables. Her hands trembled with fatigue. Her feet throbbed with pain, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't give him a reason to reprimand her, couldn't risk losing her job. That's when it happened. Marina was carrying a tray with 3 plates of food when she tripped over a bag a customer had left on the floor. The tray flew from her hands, the plates shattered on the floor with a deafening crash, and food scattered everywhere. The silence that followed was heavy, embarrassing. All the customers turned to look. Marina stood frozen, her face red with shame, tears threatening to fall. Mr. Douglas stormed out of the kitchen like an enraged bull. His small eyes glittered with anger. His fat face was red and sweaty. "Are you stupid or what?" he yelled, his voice echoing through the entire diner. "You can't even carry a plate properly, you incompetent fool." Marina lowered her head, the tears finally streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. "I tripped. It was an accident." "An accident? An accident?" Douglas continued to shout, approaching her with heavy steps. "This is coming out of your pay, and you're going to clean up this mess now, immediately." Marina knelt on the floor and began to pick up the broken pieces of crockery with trembling hands. She felt all eyes on her, the weight of humiliation crushing her chest. She wanted to disappear, wanted the earth to open up and swallow her. But she couldn't. She had to endure it. She had to bear it. For Lucas. Always for Lucas. Robert witnessed everything from the table where he sat with the children. He saw the woman kneel on the floor, saw the tears on her face, saw the way her boss humiliated her in front of everyone. Something inside him broke. His hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightened with anger. He wanted to intervene, to defend Marina, to put that man in his place, but he knew he couldn't. He knew Marina wouldn't appreciate the interference, that she would feel even more humiliated if he made a scene. So he waited. He waited until she finished cleaning, until Douglas went back to the kitchen, until the customers stopped staring. When Marina finally stood up, pale and broken, Robert approached her discreetly. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Marina wiped the tears with the back of her hand and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, it happens." "It shouldn't happen. The way he treated you was unacceptable." "He's my boss," Marina replied in a neutral voice. "He can treat me however he wants. I need the job." "But you don't deserve to be treated like that. No one does." Marina looked at him, and for the first time Robert saw anger in her eyes. "You don't understand. she said in a low but firm voice. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what it is to need something so badly that you put up with anything. Any humiliation, any disrespect, because the alternative is not having food on the table. It's not having a place to live. It's watching your child go without. So yes, I put up with it. And I'll keep putting up with it as long as I have to. Robert fell silent, feeling the weight of her words. She was right. He didn't understand, not in the way she did. Even though he had come from poverty, even though he had fought hard, he hadn't lived that reality for years. He had forgotten how desperate it was, how suffocating, how degrading. I'm sorry, he said finally. You're right. I don't understand. But I'd like to. I'd like to help. Marina shook her head. No one can help me. This is my life. And I need to get back to work. She walked away before Robert could reply, disappearing into the kitchen. He stood there, feeling powerless, frustrated. He wanted to do something, wanted to change the situation, but he didn't know how. Weeks passed. The routine continued, but there was a new tension in the air. Marina was more closed off, more distant. She talked less, smiled less, clearly rebuilding the walls, reinforcing the defenses she had, allowed to weaken. Robert felt the change and suffered with it, but he didn't know how to reverse it. It was Sophia who finally broke the ice. On a rainy Saturday in December, she suggested they all go to the park after the diner. Daddy, we could take Lucas to the park, she asked with those eyes Robert could never refuse. Please, we haven't played there in so long. Robert looked at Marina, expecting the automatic refusal, but she hesitated. Lucas was tugging on her sleeve with expectation, and there was something in her eyes, an exhaustion so deep it went beyond the physical. It was a weariness of the soul. Okay, she relented, but only for an hour. The park was Central Park, one of New York's largest, with lakes, trails, and extensive green areas. The children shot off as soon as they arrived, running across the lawn with the infinite energy only they possess. Marina and Robert walked behind, keeping enough distance to give the children privacy, but close enough to watch them. It was Robert who broke the silence. I'm sorry if I was intrusive that day. It wasn't my intention to make you feel bad. Marina sighed. It wasn't your fault. I was the one who was rude. It's just that, she paused, searching for words. It's hard to accept someone seeing you at your worst. It's hard not to feel ashamed. You have nothing to be ashamed of. What you do, working hard to support your son, that's dignified, it's admirable. It doesn't feel dignified when you're on your knees on the floor picking up dirty food while everyone watches. They walked in silence for a few minutes, listening to the children's laughter in the distance. Then Marina started to talk, and once she started, she couldn't stop. She told him about her childhood in shelters, about the constant loneliness, about the feeling of never belonging anywhere. She told him about Lucas's father, about the empty promises, about the abandonment. She told him about the debts, about the constant fear of not being able to pay the rent, about the nights she cried hidden in the bathroom so Lucas wouldn't hear. Robert listened to everything without interrupting. When she finished, her voice broken and her eyes red, he stopped walking and gently held her hand. I understand more than you can imagine, he said. I grew up poor too. I also knew hunger, deprivation, the shame of not having. My mother worked so much I barely saw her. I grew up looking at windows of things I could never have. I know what it's like to feel less, to feel like you don't deserve the good things in life. Marina looked at him in surprise. But you, she began, hesitant. You have so much now. How did you get out? Work, luck, opportunity, a bit of everything. I studied at night, took free courses, accepted any job that came along. I saved money for years, until I could open my first business. It worked out, then it worked out better, and here I am. And now you help people like me out of pity. The words came out harsher than Marina intended, but Robert didn't take offense. It's not pity, he said firmly. It's recognition. It's seeing in you and Lucas something I once was. It's wanting to help because I know a simple gesture can change an entire life. But mostly, he hesitated, searching for courage. Mostly because I like you, because I genuinely care. Marina felt her heart race. Those words were dangerous. They were tempting. They were everything she couldn't allow herself to feel, but at the same time they were exactly what she wanted to hear. "You barely know me," she whispered. "Then let me get to know you. Let me be present. Not as charity, not as pity, but as someone who wants to be a part of your life, of your lives." Marina wanted to say yes. She wanted so badly to say yes. But the fear was greater. The fear of getting hurt, the fear of hurting Lucas, the fear of depending on someone and being abandoned again. Before she could answer, the children came running back, interrupting the moment. "Mommy, Daddy, let's get ice cream," Sophia pleaded, holding Lucas's hand. The moment passed, but something had changed. Marina felt it. Robert did too. It was as if a door had opened, revealing possibilities that had previously seemed impossible. In the following Saturdays, the conversations became deeper, more intimate. Marina started to smile more, to relax, to let Robert in a little more. He, in turn, shared stories about his life, about the girls, about his dreams and fears. But there was something Robert didn't tell her. He didn't reveal who he really was, what his true financial status was, the empire he had built. He kept that part a secret, afraid it would change everything, afraid Marina would see him differently, afraid of being rejected not for who he was, but for what he had. And then, on an ordinary afternoon in January, the truth came out in the worst possible way. It was an especially busy Saturday at the diner. Marina was waiting tables because a waitress had called in sick, and Robert was sitting with the children waiting for their food. The diner's television was on the afternoon news, but no one was paying much attention, until the anchor's voice announced a special report. "We're now going to talk about one of New York's most influential entrepreneurs in the affordable housing sector. Robert Miller, CEO of Miller Homes, has just announced a new development that will benefit over 5,000 families." Marina was walking right past the television when she heard the name. She stopped. She turned to the screen. And there, in high definition, was Robert's face. Not a similar face. It was him. Exactly him. The report continued, showing images of gigantic buildings, charts of astronomical profits, interviews where Robert talked about social responsibility and inclusion. The anchor mentioned figures that made Marina's head spin. Billionaire. The word echoed in her ears. Robert Miller was a billionaire. Marina felt the floor disappear from under her feet. The tray she was holding slipped from her hands, but this time she barely heard the sound of the dishes breaking. Her eyes were fixed on the television, trying to process, trying to understand. The man who came to the diner every Saturday, who talked to her as if they were equals, who pretended to be just an ordinary father, was a billionaire. He had lied. He had hidden it. He had pretended. The feeling of betrayal was physical, like a knife entering her chest. Marina turned slowly to the table where Robert was with the children. He had seen the report too. He was pale, his eyes wide with panic. He stood up quickly, took a step toward her. "Marina, I can explain." But Marina was already backing away. The tears began to fall, burning her face. "You lied," she said, her voice breaking. "The whole time you lied to me." "I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you everything. Please let me explain." "Didn't tell me?" Marina laughed, a bitter, painful sound. "You're a billionaire. A billionaire. And me, what am I? Your charity project? Your good deed of the month? The poor woman you decided to help to feel better about yourself?" "That's not it. It was never that." "Then what is it? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you pretend to be just a normal dad?" "Because I wanted you to see me as a person, not as money. I wanted you to trust me, not what I have." "Trust!" Marina shouted. And the entire diner fell silent, everyone staring. "How can I trust someone who hid something so important? You let me open my heart, let me talk about my life, my struggles, while you had the power to fix everything and said nothing. That's cruel. That's manipulation." The children were crying now. Lucas didn't understand what was happening, but he knew something terrible was wrong. Sophia and Bella hugged each other, frightened by the shouting. Marina looked at her son, saw the tears on his face, and felt her heart shatter even more, but she couldn't stay. She couldn't remain there. She grabbed Lucas's hand forcefully. "We're leaving," she said, "now." "Marina, please," Robert begged, trying to follow. "Let's talk. Let's work this out." "There's nothing to work out. Stay away from me. Stay away from my son. We don't need your pity. We don't need anything from you." She stormed out of the diner, dragging Lucas, who was crying and shouting that he wanted to stay with the girls. Marina didn't look back. She couldn't. If she looked back, she would completely fall apart. So she kept walking, tears blinding her vision, her chest aching as if it were being crushed. Robert stood paralyzed at the diner's door, watching her disappear into the street crowd. His daughters were crying beside him, clutching his clothes. "Daddy, what happened? Why is Auntie Marina mad?" Sophia asked between sobs. "Why did Lucas leave?" Bella added. Robert had no answer. He knelt and hugged them both, tears in his eyes as well. "I messed everything up," was all he could say. "I messed everything up." Chapter 4. The days following the revelation were the darkest Marina had lived in a long time. She requested a shift change at the diner, switching to mornings to avoid any chance of running into Robert and the girls on Saturdays. Mr. Douglas complained but eventually gave in, and Marina started leaving home even earlier when the sun hadn't fully risen, returning in the mid-afternoon, exhausted and empty. Lucas didn't understand. He asked about Sophia and Bella every day, about when they would see them again, why they couldn't play together anymore. Marina tried to explain, but how do you explain betrayal to a 6-year-old? How do you say that those people who seemed so good, who treated him with such affection, were part of an unattainable world, an elaborate lie? So she just said it was complicated, that they needed some time, that maybe one day they would see each other again. But she saw the light go out in her son's eyes with each evasive answer, saw the sadness settle on that little face that had always been so smiley. At night, when Lucas finally slept, Marina allowed herself to cry. She cried for the broken trust, for the humiliation of being deceived, for the pain of having opened up to someone after so long, only to discover it was all based on lies. But mostly she cried because she missed them. She missed Robert, his conversations, his gentle gaze, the way he made her feel seen, important, worthy. And that made her even angrier with herself. How could she miss someone who had lied so much? How could her heart betray her mind like that? Robert was suffering too. He returned home that Saturday devastated, hugging his daughters who wouldn't stop crying and asking questions he couldn't answer. He spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling of his room, replaying every conversation, every moment, trying to understand where he had gone wrong. He should have told the truth from the beginning. He should have trusted Marina, given her the chance to decide if she wanted to keep knowing him, knowing who he really was. But he was afraid. Afraid of being seen only as money, as a solution to problems, as a billionaire instead of a person. And now, by hiding the truth, he had lost the very thing he was trying to protect. He tried calling Marina 10, 20, 30 times. She blocked his number. He sent messages. She didn't reply. He went to the diner, but Marina asked another employee to tell him she didn't want to talk to him. Robert respected that. He didn't want to force it, didn't want to pressure her, didn't want to be more intrusive than he already had been. So he backed off, giving her space, giving her time, hoping that one day she would agree to hear his side, understand his reasons, maybe even forgive him. Sophia and Bella felt Lucas's absence deeply. They asked about their friend every day, wanted to go to his house, didn't understand why they couldn't see him anymore. Robert tried to explain, but how do you explain the complexity of adult relationships to 6-year-olds? So he just said that Lucas's mom was upset and that they needed to give her time. The girls were sad. They drew pictures for Lucas that were never delivered. They saved toys they wanted to give him. The house became quieter, heavier, as if an essential part had been torn away. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silent suffering on both sides, of lives that went on but felt empty, of broken hearts that stubbornly refused to heal. Marina worked mechanically, came home, took care of Lucas, went to bed late and woke up early. There was no joy, only survival. The tiny apartment seemed even smaller, more suffocating, sadder. Lucas cried at night, hugging his fire truck, saying he missed the girls. And Marina had no way to comfort him because she needed comfort herself. It was on a Sunday in February, a hot and sunny day that contrasted cruelly with the darkness Marina felt inside, that she decided to take Lucas to the park. Not Central Park, where they had gone with Robert and the girls. A different, smaller park in Queens near where they lived. She thought that maybe a little fresh air and open space would help her son get distracted, smile again, even if just for a few hours. The park was full. Families spread out on the lawns, children running, parents pushing swings, dogs barking. Marina found a bench in the shade of a tree and sat down, watching Lucas walk slowly toward the playground. He wasn't running like before, not shouting with joy, just walking with his shoulders slumped, the fire truck hanging loosely in one hand. That's when Marina heard the screams, Sophia and Bella, unmistakable voices full of emotion. Turning her head quickly, she saw the two girls running through the park, pointing in Lucas's direction, and behind them, trying to keep up, was Robert. Marina's heart raced. She wanted to get up, to grab Lucas and leave before they met. But it was too late. The girls had already reached him. They threw themselves on him in a tight hug, so strong that the three of them fell to the ground in a ball of arms and legs and laughter. Lucas was crying and laughing at the same time, hugging his friends as if he would never let them go. "I missed you so much," he sobbed. "So much." "We missed you too," Sophia said, kissing his face. "Why did you disappear? Why didn't you come to see us anymore?" "My mom said I couldn't," Lucas explained between tears. "But now you're here. Now we can play again." Marina watched the scene from a distance, feeling her chest tighten so much she could barely breathe. Then Robert approached her, slowly, as if afraid she would run away. He stopped a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his face marked by a sadness she recognized because it was the same as hers. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi," Marina replied, her voice hoarse. "It wasn't planned. I swear. We just came to spend the afternoon at the park. I didn't know you'd be here." "I know," Marina said, and it was true. She could see in the genuine surprise in his eyes that the encounter was accidental. They stood in silence for long seconds, watching the children play with a joy they hadn't felt in weeks. It was Marina who spoke first, surprising herself. She began, but her voice failed. She took a deep breath and tried again. "I'm sorry. For the way I reacted, for the things I said." Robert shook his head quickly. "No, you had every right to be angry. I'm the one who should have told the truth from the beginning." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid," Robert admitted, and there was a raw honesty in his voice that made Marina look him in the eye for the first time. "Afraid you would see me only as money, afraid that our friendship, or whatever we were building, would be tainted by it. Afraid you'd think I wanted to buy your gratitude, your attention, I don't know. I just wanted to be seen as a person. As Robert, not as the billionaire Robert Miller." Marina felt something shift inside her. She could understand that. She could understand the fear of not being seen, the desire to be accepted for who you are and not what you have. "But do you understand why I felt betrayed?" she asked. "Do you understand that it felt like manipulation? That it felt like you were playing at being poor while I really am poor, and I told you everything about my life thinking you understood, that you were on the same level?" "I understand," Robert said, his voice choked. "And I'm sorry. Sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to make you feel that way." Marina felt the tears start to fall. "I was so scared," she whispered. "Scared of trusting again. Scared of opening up. Scared of depending on someone. And when I finally let you in, when I let Lucas get attached to you and your daughters, when I let my heart start to feel things it hadn't felt in years, She shook her head, unable to continue. "I know, and it was the worst thing I could have done. But Marina, please believe me when I say my feelings are real. The affection I have for you and Lucas is real. The conversations, the moments, everything was real. The money doesn't change that. It doesn't change what I feel." Marina looked at him, really looked, seeing beyond the appearance, beyond the betrayal, seeing the man she had gotten to know over the past few months. The kind man who treated Lucas like a son, who listened to her attentively, who laughed at her, bad jokes, who made her feel important. He was telling the truth. She saw it in his eyes, in the way his whole body seemed tense with hope and fear. "I miss you too," Marina admitted finally. "You and the girls. We both do. Lucas cries every day, wanting to see his friends. And I've been more lost than I was before I met you, because now I know what it's like to have someone. And losing that was—" She paused, taking a deep breath. "It was terrible. Then give me a chance. Give us a chance. Let's start over with total honesty. No secrets, no lies. I promise to be completely transparent from now on. I promise not to hide anything else. Just please don't give up on us. Don't give up on what we can build together." Marina looked at the children, who were playing as if they had never been separated, as if the past few weeks hadn't existed. She saw the happiness on Lucas's face, the light that had returned to his eyes. And she thought about how many times in her life she had had to choose between pride and happiness, between protection and possibility. She had always chosen protection, always built walls, always run away before she could be abandoned. But where had that gotten her? To loneliness, to bitterness, to a life without color, without joy, without love. Maybe it was time to choose differently. Maybe it was time to take a risk, even if it hurt, even if it was scary, even if it could go wrong. "Okay," she said, and she saw Robert's eyes light up with hope. "But on conditions. Total honesty. No secrets, and slowly. I need time to trust again." "As much time as you need," Robert promised. "I'm not going anywhere. And I don't want you to try to solve my problems with money. I don't want to be your project. If we're going to try this, whatever this is, I want it to be as equals. It might not be equal financially, but emotionally, as people, as—" she hesitated, "as whatever we're becoming. As friends who could become something more," Robert suggested with a shy smile. "If you want, when you want, in your own time." Marina felt something release inside her, like a rope that had been constricting her chest and was finally cut. She smiled for the first time in weeks. "In my own time," she agreed. Robert held out his hand. "Start over." Marina looked at his outstretched hand, at his eyes full of sincerity and hope, and then she placed her hand on his. "Start over," she repeated. And then he pulled her into a hug. It was hesitant at first, giving her the chance to pull back if she wanted, but Marina didn't pull back. On the contrary, she hugged him back, holding on tight, letting herself feel for the first time in a long time the comfort of being in the arms of someone who cared. She cried on his shoulder, sobs that came from a deep place, releasing weeks of pain and loneliness and fear. Robert held her, stroking her hair, whispering that it was okay, that they were going to be okay, that he would never leave her again. The children ran to them, hugging the two adults in a chaotic mess of small arms and loud laughter. "Now we're a family again," Bella said, with the wise simplicity of children. And Marina, looking at the three children hugging, at Robert by her side, felt for the first time that maybe, just maybe, that child was right. The months that followed were a time of rebuilding, but this time on solid foundations of honesty and respect. Robert formally introduced Marina to his world, explaining his company, his work, his wealth, but always making it clear that it didn't define who he was. He took her to see his office, introduced her to the team, showed her the affordable housing projects he built. Marina was impressed, not just by the scale of the business, but by the genuine passion Robert had for his work, for the real desire to make a difference in people's lives. And then came the proposal that would change everything. Robert offered Marina a job at his company in the Human Resources Department. She hesitated for a long time. She didn't want to seem like she was accepting charity, didn't want people to think she was with him for the money. But Robert insisted she was qualified, that she had an empathy and understanding that many executives lacked, that she could make a real difference in how the company treated its employees. With courage, Marina accepted. She quit her job at the diner, facing Mr. Douglas's anger and feeling of freedom she hadn't experienced in years. She started working at Miller Homes on a rainy Monday in March with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The environment was completely different. There was respect, there was dignity, there were opportunities for growth. Marina began to study, taking online courses at night, learning about management, leadership, communication. She discovered she was capable, that she was intelligent, that she had a lot to offer. The decent salary transformed her life almost overnight. She was able to pay off all her overdue debts. She was able to rent a better apartment, with 2 bedrooms in a decent building with security and an elevator. She was able to buy new clothes for Lucas, enroll him in a good private school, give him the opportunities she had always dreamed of giving him. She saw her son flourish, make new friends, discover talents, dream bigger. And the relationship between her and Robert grew too, slowly but steadily, as Robert had promised. Casual dinners became a tradition, park outings every weekend, long conversations about everything and nothing. The children were inseparable, spending whole weekends together, inventing elaborate games, creating bonds that went beyond friendship. They were siblings of the heart, as Bella used to say. Marina learned to trust again. It wasn't easy, it wasn't fast, but it happened. Brick by brick, she tore down the walls she had built around her heart, allowing Robert to truly enter. And he treated that trust as the most precious gift, never betraying it, never lying, always present, always constant. 6 months after their reunion in the park, on a sunny afternoon in August, the 3 children were playing in the garden of Robert's new house, where he had moved to have more space to host Marina and Lucas. It was a beautiful but not ostentatious house in a quiet neighborhood, with a large yard where the children could run and play. Marina and Robert were sitting on the porch, watching the children with that silent contentment of someone who is exactly where they should be. That's when Lucas approached, the fire truck still in his hand, even after all this time, and asked the question that would change everything. "Auntie, Uncle," he began, looking at them both seriously. "Are we a family now?" Marina looked at Robert, saw the love in his eyes, the same unspoken question. He held her hand, intertwining their fingers, and waited for her to answer first. Marina smiled, her eyes welling with happy tears. "If you want us to be," she said, looking at the 3 children, at Robert, at that perfect moment that had seemed impossible months ago. "If you want, we already are." The children screamed with joy, jumped, hugged each other, celebrating as if they had won the best gift in the world. And in a way, they had. All of them had. They had gained belonging. They had gained love. They had gained a family. Sophia ran to Robert and hugged him tightly. "I always wanted a brother," she said, "and now I have Lucas." "And I always wanted sisters," Lucas added, hugging Bella too. "And now I have 2. Robert pulled Marina closer, kissing her forehead tenderly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me a chance, for trusting me, for building this with us." Marina rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she replied, "for showing me that there's still kindness in the world, that it's still worth taking a risk, that love exists even when you think you don't deserve it." "So you always deserved it," Robert said firmly. "Always." They stood there, embraced, watching the children play in the garden lit by the afternoon sun. Life had taken so many turns, had been so hard, so unfair, so cruel, but it had also been generous when they least expected it, had brought the right people at the right time, had offered second chances when it seemed there was no hope left. Marina thought about everything she had been through, all the pain, all the struggles, all the moments she wanted to give up but carried on for Lucas. And now, looking around, seeing her son's joy, feeling Robert's love, finally belonging to something greater than just survival, she knew it had all been worth it. Every tear, every sacrifice, every difficult day had been worth it to get here. Months turned into years. Marina grew professionally, becoming the human resources manager of the company. Her story inspired other employees, showing them that it was possible to change your life, that opportunities existed for those who fought for them. Lucas grew up strong and happy, a bright boy who dreamed of being an architect to build beautiful houses for families in need, just like Robert did. Sophia and Bella became incredible young women, full of empathy and a sense of justice, shaped by the experience of seeing beyond their privilege, of understanding that kindness transforms lives. And Robert and Marina, after 2 years of a solid relationship, got married in a simple but emotional ceremony, with only close family and dear friends. The children were the ring bearers and flower girls, walking down the aisle together, symbolizing a union that went far beyond the 2 adults. It was the union of 2 families that became one, of 2 worlds that met and decided to build something new together. On their wedding night, after everyone had gone home and the children were sleeping, exhausted from so much celebration, Marina and Robert stood alone on the porch of their house, looking at the stars shining in the New York sky. "Can you believe it all started with a toy truck?" Marina said, smiling at the memory. Robert pulled her close, kissing her hair. "It wasn't the truck," he corrected gently. "It was the kindness of 2 6-year-old girls who saw a sad boy and wanted to help. It was your strength to keep fighting, even when everything seemed impossible. It was chance putting us in the same place at the right time. It was all of that together. Do you think we were destined to meet? I think life puts people in our path when we're ready for them. And I was ready for you, Marina. I was ready to love again, to build a family again, to be happy again." "Me too," Marina whispered, her eyes full of happy tears. "I was ready too. I just didn't know it yet." They kissed under the stars, 2 survivors who found refuge in each other. 2 wounded souls who healed together. 2 people who proved that love doesn't see social class, that kindness transforms, that second chances exist for those who have the courage to accept them. Their story was proof that miracles happen not in grand gestures, but in small acts of generosity that multiply and transform entire lives. It was proof that family is not just blood, but choice, love, and constant presence. It was proof that it's worth believing, worth trusting, worth loving, even when the world insists on showing you otherwise. And as they slept that night, wrapped in each other's arms with their 3 children dreaming in nearby rooms, a new family rested in peace, complete, happy, and finally home.